So, what does it take to create real wellness at work? Too often, we create these wellness programs and we create fitness programs. And in those fitness programs, we see people who are already pretty fit. I think there's a lot more to it. And a discussion about that's coming up right now. Hi there, I'm Andrea Adams. This is the HR Hub, and on this show, we talk about anything related to HR. I encourage you to please subscribe to the show or to the podcast to keep learning from my guests. So today, my guest is Tim Borys. Tim's been in the wellness industry quite a while. He's passionate about helping organizations go beyond the superficial and create wellness changes that impact the bottom line. He's an author, a speaker, and he has his own podcast called the Working Well podcast. Hi, Tim. How are you?
Awesome. Glad to be here.
Great. Well, I'm glad to have you. We were just saying before I clicked record that we have some meaty topics today. So I'm going to dive right in. And so, in relation to my intro, it does seem to me that we create these programs, we build a gym, we hire instructors, but mostly those programs reach the people who are already doing those things in some facet in their life. So, two questions about that. One, is my observation right? And regardless, why are so many of the wellness programs we put into place superficial?
Well, that's, again, a big question.
Yes. Yeah. I know.
Well,
Like, we're all trying, we're all well intentioned.
absolutely, yeah. I've I've yet to meet someone in the wellness or HR industry that's in it for the money.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
And all these programs are out there and people want to make an impact, but I think the biggest thing is, what is wellness? So many people define wellness differently. People are looking at the wellness tactics, and this is where I usually help by asking people to differentiate between wellness and well-being. Because wellness is the stuff you do to ideally improve well-being,
Hmm.
but there's not always a connection, because you can have the gym and you can have the benefits plans and you could have all these things, the yoga classes at lunch and the, fruit bowls and all these tactics that people have done over the years.
Yes.
You can check those boxes and still not have well-being in your people. This is where I feel HR is well-meaning, but not necessarily making the impact that they can. And there's lots of reasons for that. But I think it comes down to, first, the definition.
Hmm.
What is it we're doing? Are we checking boxes or are we improving well-being? Because when you start to shift that mindset and the lens and say, okay, we're not just providing wellness, our goal is to improve well-being, and we're going to try and do that through wellness. But if it's not working, at some point we need to say, all right, what other factors are involved, and how is well-being, how are we going to get to that well-being point? Because well-being is a state of being. It's you're happy, you're healthy, you're functioning on all, firing on all cylinders.
Mm-hmm.
It's an outcome.
Yeah.
And I've seen, quote, best places to work. They're on the lists every year, and they've checked every single one of the boxes. They're winning awards for their wellness programs, and they're stressed out, they're burnt out, they're disengaged, they're frustrated. You can have all of those things, but I'm like, if your if you're working for a toxic boss, none of that matters. It's a Band-Aid, and it's nicer to have that than not have it, but it really is just a Band-Aid at that point.
Hmm.
And that's where I see a lot of companies are throwing more money and more resources at wellness, but not taking a hard look in the mirror and saying, okay, what is it about our corporate culture, our leadership, that is creating these outcomes of poor well-being?
That leads perfectly into my next question. So if we start at the 10,000 foot view or 20,000, whatever number you want to use, but high, what mindsets or perspectives are critical for building an effective wellness program that actually drives well being? And then I guess also, not everybody's going to understand what that really is, like, and not have a very crystal clear vision of what we're aiming for. So who needs to have that?
Well, yeah, and when you said 10,000 foot view, 20,000 foot, I'm like, what's the 50,000 foot? But
Okay, all right. Let's
or
go.
100,000. We need to be at the highest levels of the organization creating that mindset shift. So the C-suite has to understand the difference between wellness and well-being. They have to then say, we buy into well-being and we believe it's important and we're going to put our money where our mouth is and rubber to the road and get some clear accountability at the C-suite to make that happen.
So we often assume that well employees are going to be productive employees, but I've never actually seen any data to show that. So two-part question here. What do the studies say about the business value of wellness or well-being, whichever word you want to use? And and then for us in our organizations, how can we measure the impact of it? What do you suggest?
Yeah, so I think the first part of that question, what do the stats say? That refers to what is your definition of wellness
Okay.
and well-being.
Yeah.
And so, like, if we step back to the bigger picture and say healthy, happy, engaged, high functioning people,
Yeah.
we know they perform better than people who are stressed out, burnt out, disengaged, not connected. So if we just look at like engagement stats,
Okay.
it's something like the people that are actively disengaged. I can't remember the exact stat. It's
It was
something
like 20 or 15% or something. Yeah.
Yeah, but those people cost the business, it's like 5 to 10 times more than someone who is just not even actively engaged, but just normal, like the
Mhm.
in the middle of the bell curve. It's like the 80-20 rule. Like the people that are most engaged are only maybe 20%, but they're producing 80% of the results.
Uh,
And again, there are lots of stats out there on engagement, and there's subsets of engagement. So as an organization, looking at what are our biggest pain points? Is it turnover? We know that it can be anywhere from, I think it's like zero point 0.6 to 1.5, maybe even 2 times a person's annual salary to replace them. So if your turnover is at 50%, which I've seen in some divisions and some companies, talking to uh, organization, they're a growing organization, and they have a lot of lower wage frontline staff, and they literally have 50% turnover in their frontline staff, and that's expensive. And so when we start talking about well-being, we're not talking about yoga classes and gym memberships and things like
mm,
that. We're talking about, does your boss help you feel respected and like you're contributing? When that's well-being, hands down, the experience an employee has with their leader is the number one defining factor in well-being.
yeah. So many of us already have some form of wellness program that we hope is driving more well being. But whether we're starting from scratch or whether we're refreshing our existing efforts, what other tips do you recommend to ensure that we're having real success, that ultimately we're driving well being the way you've described it?
If it's driven by HR, the number one thing is to first shift that to that strategic mindset and
Okay.
think, okay, let's step back from the traditional wellness lens, look at the bigger picture.
Okay.
The next step is to identify who the champions are either at the VP or C-suite level that are sharing or able to share, or you're able to influence to see this bigger picture of the difference between wellness and well-being. It's I can't say there's one specific thing you can do because every organization is different. Every organization is filled with humans,
Mhm.
from the flawed and amazing perspective.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
being able to be strategic on who you connect with and who you build those relationships with to be able to get programs done. There's a way of working in the organization, and I've consulted and been in some organizations that until certain people at the C-suite leave, change will not happen. And one of the most challenging aspects that I've seen and I see happening more and more since COVID is there's no doubt there's greater awareness of the importance of well-being. Companies, again, there's still this disconnect between wellness and well-being. They understand that people need to be a bit more engaged and healthy and happy and feeling connected to the company, but companies are spending more and more on wellness and not changing the corporate culture. They're not changing the the day-to-day actions of leaders.
Yeah.
And so when you get all this, you're checking more boxes, but the culture is not changing, it actually makes it worse because now you're creating an even greater disconnect between marketed perception and reality. So companies like, we're a best place to work. We've won all this awards. And people are like, my boss is still an asshole. Like, what why do I hate going to work every day if we're a best place to work? We've got all these things, but my leader doesn't support me utilizing them, or it's almost dangled as a carrot and then pulled away because it's like, well, you book meetings over lunch and right up till this time, so I can't use the resources we have. So how do we differentiate between the marketing,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
recruiting side and the day-to-day reality of the business?
Let's say you had $100,000 to invest in whatever they are doing. For the majority of your clients, how would you allocate that money?
I'd say 100% of it will go towards things that improve well-being. Um,
And what would those things be? For the majority of your clients, we're generalizing, I know, but what would they be?
Things that directly impact the employee experience on a day-to-day basis, particularly leadership development.
Okay.
And there are lots of leadership programs out there to teach people how to lead. And one of the things that I feel is missing most from those, well, I wouldn't say missing most. I think they don't tie it as well to well-being outcomes.
Mm.
So we talk about empathetic leadership, servant leadership, and those are important for sure.
Mm.
But there's this like slight mindset shift or perspective shift that, hey, when we do those things, it's not just about improving the work atmosphere. It improves the entire corporate culture. It improves the value for that person and the organization. It's not we're just trying to improve work. We're trying to build amazing humans that help inspire other amazing humans. And when we do that, everyone wins. If you just have the traditional administrative
Yeah.
lens and you're in a leadership and development role, it's like I'm gonna do create a different policy manual that's gonna help walk people through this step, and we're gonna do this tactical thing and this tactical thing instead of stepping back and say, okay, yeah, that's important, but then how are we helping them improve the employee experience? How are we helping them have those tough
Yeah.
conversations? When to coach, when to mentor, when to teach and train. Those are the skills that I feel are touched on in certain courses, but people aren't getting them early enough in their
Yeah.
career.
Yeah.
And even before they're leaders, like those are skills that help people just navigate interpersonal relationships better.
Mhm.
It's not something we learn in school. It's not something we learn at work. And yet leaders are expected to know how to do it. And some people, when they get to leadership down the road, probably years into their leadership journey, when they hit the executive level, director, VP, then they get these more detailed executive coaching and leadership retreats where they will dive into some of that stuff. But they've already spent 10 years or more building bad habits.
Hey, business owners, executive directors, are people stresses or challenges getting in your way? Imagine managing your people issues smoothly, addressing, better yet, dealing with employee problems before they're ever a big problem, adapting to all the changes in employee rules, and doing all of this easily. I can deal with your HR challenges so they're resolved. With me, you'll get the right things done, build a strong team, and create a workplace where the right people want to be. Your business deserves to thrive without a lot of HR hassle. I'm here to help you make that happen. With my assistance, you can focus on business growth, supported by a strong team. Take a first step towards a better business today. Reach out and let's chat. Visit thehrhub.ca and let's begin transforming your people challenges.
As I was researching to do this, and as I was researching you actually, I came across that something around habits. Where do habits fit into building wellness, and how can organizations help employees build better habits?
Great question. Yeah. And we all have habits.
Yes, some of them are
Some are
helpful and
work,
some of them are not.
yeah, some are working against us and some are just neutral. Which habits you're wanting to develop are going to be based on the mission, vision, values, goals of the organization and the leaders that are in those positions. Now, very few companies do the hard work to, first of all, identify those mission, vision, values. Most companies have a mission, vision, values, but they're they're not living them on a day-to-day basis. The habits come in when we say, what are the behaviors that we want leaders to be emulating? What do we want them to be demonstrating every day? And which behaviors do we want being recognized, rewarded, and reinforced? When we've identified that and get very, very clear to our leaders and our teams, this is what's expected, then those habits start to become powerful. Again, we all have habits right now, and a lot of leaders have habits that are leading to toxic workplaces and poor culture. They might not, I'm very conscious to say this. I've only met a handful of leaders ever that are just bad, negative, vindictive people
Yeah,
that are out there to,
handful. I mean, you could probably count them on one hand.
yeah,
There aren't many of them.
no. And those are like the random psychopaths in the world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and then they ruin it for everybody else.
Well, but there are a lot of leaders out there who are unconsciously doing things that are creating a toxic work environment. They don't mean
Yeah.
it in a bad way. They just haven't been taught the skills or learned the skills or developed the skills necessary to lead with empathy and become an amazing leader.
Mhm.
I firmly believe that everyone can become an amazing leader. Not everyone has the internal fortitude to do the work,
Yeah.
uh, or the external resources to support that work,
Mhm.
or the timing in their career when they can practice that work. So getting all three of those to line up is important, and companies can do that by giving people chances to lead, even if it's in small little things. As a leader, you can help your team members practice leading in meetings and things like that. And then reinforce the behaviors that you want to see. But in order to do that, we have to have a clear vision of what a great leader is in our organizational culture. Because if you're Gordon Gekko and you're or running a whatever the movie Wolf of Wall Street, or is there something like that? If that's the culture you want to emulate, great. There are certain behaviors that will support that. But if you don't, what are the behaviors that are going to support the culture you want, and how you curate those on a day-to-day basis? For me, that's where habits come in.
Wow, so much to think about. And so much more we could delve into. I do have to close this off. So, in your work and in supporting businesses and leaders to promote well-being, what resources do you refer to advance your thinking? First question, and where can someone find you?
Resources, lots of reading, books, podcasts. Deloitte is a company that is leading the way in well-being, or they call it human sustainability,
Okay.
which is basically sustainable human performance.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I love some of the work that Deloitte's putting out. Gartner has a bunch of great stats on well-being and organizational performance. And so I look for the newest, latest things coming out. There are lots of great people out there leading the way in various areas of well-being. So trying to be well-read and well-researched, and look for valid sources of research.
Yeah.
Not everything you read online or from ChatGPT is correct.
Right.
So
Right.
find valid sources, and that's what I try and do. And then where people can find me, timborys.com. I'm on LinkedIn, and feel free to connect.
Okay. Let's leave it there. Well, thanks, Tim. That was thought-provoking, and thought-provoking in a sense of seeing the whole picture, and really a laser focus on the role of leaders in creating well-being. Those poor leaders getting another thing on their shoulders. Anyway, I did another wellness episode with someone who would probably agree with Tim on so many points. She pulled no punches in talking about the wellness industry, and that link's right there. Thanks for watching out there, and see you next time.